Dude, when the devs said exciting new gameplay modifications, they were not kidding. We have an aura flow state. What? Hello everyone, 11.0 released today with brand new mechanics, hitbox changes, balance adjustments, and more that we have to cover today. There is a lot in this video, so we're going to start with these overall exciting gameplay modifications and then get into the patches. This was a long analysis to do, so please subscribe to support the channel if you enjoyed this video. So first off, we have the flow aura state, and yeah, that's actually what they're calling this. This is a new mechanic that will activate when you get a certain amount of kills continuously. More on that later. And will boost your abilities for 30 seconds in terms of your swim speed, run speed, ink resistance, and intensify action up. This timer can also be extended if the player with it gets more kills, assists, paints near the opponent, or kills someone on the other team that has aura. This aura also does not have an effect that reveals your location like Tacticooler, so it might have some good synergy with Ninja Squid. Splatoon NA also adds securing zones with ink. This could just be a mistranslation of paint, but it could also imply that the objective would be another way to help farm this perk. Those factors will also allow you to proc aura with less kills. So yes, this is absolutely a playmaking thing. It allows you to see who's popping off and gives them a higher potential to make more plays happen. However, all of these abilities also overlap with Cooler, so it's unknown if these will really stack. My guess would be no. We also have no idea how much of each ability is actually activated. My guess right now would be just the same amount as Tacticooler. However, as far as I'm aware, this is something that you lose when you die. So keeping this active for a long time is going to be quite difficult, especially because unlike Cooler, you don't have quick super jump to help you out here. So you really got to be careful about that. This will obviously benefit weapons with high playmaking power or weapons that can get the ability to have assists. For example, I think one of the best weapons for this is heavy edit splatling. Splatlings benefit a lot from all of these abilities, and edit's Tacticooler gives it a natural way to keep assists to allow that ability to keep going. If you stay alive, you can use the flow aura state to keep up your mobility while you farm your next cooler and use them to effectively cycle your mobility perks. That's really cool. Obviously, there are other options that benefit from this. Shooters have a lot of mobility tools. Blasters benefit from the intensify action to stay alive. Defensive weapons will like this mobility if they're being rushed down. Every weapon is going to benefit in some way, making this a general increase to main weapon power. But overall, this benefits playmaking weapons or weapons that have the ability to keep assists going after making a play. I just think this is really cool, especially from a spectator point of view. It's gonna add a lot of hype to games itself, and it is really interesting. But that's not the only mechanic we got. A smaller but still nice quality of life one that we have is health bars. Now, if you damage an opponent and they are visible to you, you will be able to see the amount of HP they have remaining in this bar right here. So rip to everyone who says they're one when they're not, including me. Now, if the opponent is hidden, this health bar won't display unless they're marked by things like point sensor. So that's a cool way to buff sub-weapons like that since they get some new utility. Overall, this is mostly a quality of life thing though. It'll be a little bit easier to tell if you should go for certain fights, but I don't think it's going to dramatically change the balance of the game or anything. Let's now talk about the largest change, and one the devs talked about quite a bit. We are getting a hitbox adjustment. Specifically, squid form is now going to be a good bit smaller. The devs actually talk about this in great detail, that in Splatoon, using a gyro sensor to target an opponent in 3D space was relatively rare. But long since Splatoon has been released, people got a lot better at the motion controls, and it's affected the game in ways the devs didn't intend. In other words, people got so good at motion controls that they're now changing hitboxes to make squid form better at evading attacks. That's pretty wild. Mainstream motion controls hasn't caught on yet, but here they're so significant that they have to rebalance the game. You can keep that in the video. That's my alarm. But here they're so significant that they're actually rebalancing the game around it. Now, there are more changes besides just this though. They're also adjusting the hitboxes of weapons to compensate, and this will change a little bit depending on the range value. So for very close range weapons like the Splattershot Jr., attacks on squid form are slightly harder, but attacks on the human form are much easier. For short-range weapons like Splattershot, attacks on squid form are a little harder to hit than Junior, but attacks on human form are a little easier, though not as easy as something like Junior. And this goes all the way to Leader. For E-Leader, it is still slightly easier to hit people in human form, but it's much harder to hit people in squid form. So every weapon is getting a slightly larger hitbox, and kit form is easier to hit for every single weapon, and squid form is also harder to hit for every single weapon. But this will scale a bit with the range, which makes sense. Long range weapons would have benefited from this way more if this wasn't done in this way, since obviously they have harder to hit shots than close range weapons. So this change does make sense. And if you play something like Leader and you're worried, I don't think you should be, because being able to hit people in human form easier is really important for a weapon that wants to hit people when they're slower. For example, shooting splatlings that are running, brushes that are rolling, or even just blasters while they're in their end lag are going to be easier. This change globally means that mobility weapons and options that have an easier time entering squid form are going to be harder to take out, whereas weapons that are slower are going to be easier. This in particular balances a lot of the large hitbox weapons differently. Think things like Blaster and Mid-Decapitator. While they will have an easier time hitting opponents in squid form than other weapons due to their larger hitboxes, they subsequently are going to be much easier targets. Think about hitting a Mid when it's dash slashing and it's stuck in human form. This even applies to some special weapons, such as being in Booyah Bomb or standing throwing Tri-Strike, where you are now easier targets. This hitbox change also hurts passive painting, since you'll be standing while doing that and therefore more susceptible to being shot back. In general, this is going to help short-range mobile weapons more than anything else, but those are also weapons that have struggled to be good in this game outside of special spamming, so I think it does make sense. And the effect is subtle enough to where I don't think it's going to tone back long-range weapons in a way that makes them feel unplayable or anything. They're still going to have a lot of power to them. And in general, Splatoon does have a problem with quick kill times and large AoE hitboxes, so I think giving more mobility tools so that players have ways of working around this to stay alive is a natural course of direction for the game. And also, on a personal note, yeah, look at that old squid form hitbox, it was a little deceptive to begin with. I think this will be a little bit easier for players to understand now. So this to me reads more like a balance change, but it's listed with all the other gameplay adjustments. This one applies to stealth jump. Stealth jump is being changed so that the further distance you travel in the air, the slower your jump is going to be, specifically only affecting the time you spend in the air.
Well, I sure hope somebody picks up that phone.
Do what?
Because I f***ing called it!
Interesting when it had a downside. I would like to reintroduce the 20% penalty it had, but instead make it so that it only affects the time spent in the air. Seriously, I predicted a few things before the patch came out, but this might be the most specific one. Like, what the hell? I can't believe this actually happened. Yes, I like this change. This is a good nerf to the whole Q-issue thing I talked about. You can find more detail about that in this video. I'll have it linked in the description. Overall, not a drastic change. Stealth is still OP, but I think this does good for making Q-ishing around just a little bit less OP. And guess what? We're not even done. We got the balance patch. And we start with two main weapon reworks. The first up is L3 Nozzle Nose. I'm gonna be honest, this one's a little disappointing. They totally nerfed its painting power by 15% in exchange for the shots traveling slightly faster by 24%. Good direction, but this is definitely more of a nerf than a buff. I really don't know what the plan was for this. We needed something else alongside this, like better jump accuracy or something. But hey, at least it's one less weapon spamming ultra stamps across the map.
It's back!
I heard, Peter! I heard!
Kids! Kids, it's happening! Get your coats! This is what we practiced for!
Yeah! I love you, Dad!
I love you too, sweetheart! None of the past matters!
Guys, I truly can't believe that this happened. This isn't, we made the paint closer together, but it actually paints slightly less. No, this is, we made it paint better in both swings! And it deals more than 100 damage from further away! in both swings. In exchange, we get 5 Flick Dynamo back like it was in Splatoon 1. And you know what? That's fine. Main Saver stacks so well with it. Dynamo might be real. The cooler kit is definitely the main one here. And do you know what I think its best synergy is with? Honestly, it's probably Bow. Bow won't take up as much of its close range paint, doesn't overlap with Cooler, and has a lot of other AoE to work around the weapon. This could be a really interesting combo. And in general, Dynamo might finally be back. It took an exceptionally long time, ever since the nerfs all the way back at Splatoon 2's launch. But we might finally be at an era where Dynamo is a real weapon, and I cannot wait to play it. Next up is Blaster. It's now 2 frames faster when going into squid form. Yes, this is the same buff it got in Splatoon 2, just by 2 frames instead of 7, but that's a total of 9 frames. So Blaster will be a decent bit faster. It seems like they really wanted Blaster to stand out a little bit more from S-Blast. More on that in a minute. H3 gets 1 more damage. I mean, like, good change, but again, that we needed another thing with this, like ink efficiency or mobility or something, you know. This is a little bit unfortunate. H3 needs a bit more than this, but alright, better than nothing. Splat Roller is also getting a small buff here, reducing the amount of time it takes to start recovering ink after attacking. We haven't seen Roller too much lately, but mostly because a lot of the main Roller players at top level just aren't playing right now. So it's kind of hard to gauge if this is something it's specifically needed or not, but I'm down for the change. Heavy Splatling is up next, increasing the radius of paint by 12%. This thing's gonna get a lot of wave breakers. We're very lucky it's only spamming a wave breaker, and it will also increase the radius of point of impact at 12%, which is just basically another paint buff. So Heavy gonna be getting a lot of wave breakers and a lot of paint on the floor, which, sure, I'm kind of okay with this change, as long as Heavy doesn't get a third kit with a very annoying special down the line. Otherwise, that will be annoying. Tetra Dualies is also finally getting a buff after, I mean, it's been such a long time. It's getting faster shot speed, which does make it a lot easier to hit opponents. And it will also benefit from a Reef Slider change we're getting to later. So Tetra might be interesting in this next patch. Brella is getting a 9% ink consumption decrease. We are now back to Brella's old ink efficiency, or at least most of the way back. Now, Brella does kind of get hurt from the changes to the hitbox size since you're in human form quite a lot. So I think giving it a buff is fine. I don't know if ink efficiency is what it needed, but also not a bad change given it's more of a support lately, so I'm down for this. And finally, we have one main weapon nerf. Pencil may have gotten away, though it admittedly has increased competition now, but S-Blast did not. They nerfed the short range blast radius by 11%. This will now be substantially slower than Luna and Clash Blaster, now being more comparable to where Range Blaster's old shot was, at a size of 35. But you know, in close range now. I'm totally fine with this change. The long range mode requires quite a bit of skill for both blast radiuses, and this was kind of the thing that made the weapon a little easy. It still has a large blast radius, but it feels a little bit more reasonable now. In addition to that, down the line it also gets 210 points for special for Booyah Bomb, a special that is also getting adjusted by the hitbox changes. So overall, I think S-Blast might be in a good balance spot. The rest of the points for special changes are pretty light. Squiffer and ZF Charger are getting a little bit cheaper. Machine is finally escaping 220p. Splattershot Pro will be a little bit weaker at spamming Crab. Mini a little bit weaker at spamming Hammer. But the main change here is Tri-Slosher going down to 200p. Tri-Slosher has been used a little bit, and if mobility is more important, Tri-Slosher is a great weapon at dealing with that. Faster cooler output is the main thing it needs. So, like with Dynamo Roller, I think this will add some much needed competition to the cooler slot. In particular, I'm curious if it will synergize well with E-Liter, given it's good on weaker E-Liter maps and good at fending for the weapon in close range. It's something we saw a little bit in Area Cup, but it might be even stronger now. Last, but certainly not least, is Reef Slider, getting a whole host of changes. The radius that does 220 damage will be increased by 20%, without changing the damage radius that does 70. In addition to that, they raise the center point of the explosion, so that the tiniest of ledges will not cut it off anymore. Thank you. This makes it way better at combat. I wonder what the compensation for this is going to be. So the pain radius is toned back again by another 7%. And the maximum distance of the charge is decreased by 19%. This basically ends Zone's cheese, at least the unreasonable kind, because now you have to be closer to Zone and it's not going to pain as much. It's probably not worth it now. At least that'd be my guess. Now, I do wish these numbers were changed a bit. I get that they decreased the charge distance to make it better in close range, and that does seem reasonable given the larger 220 hitbox and ability to also tone back zones cheese, but I wish the change was more decrease the radius of the explosion by 19% and the maximum distance by 7%. Being able to travel far away is kind of something that made the special more interesting, and I do think it loses a little bit of that here. That said, zones cheese is like the most annoying thing in solo queue for zones, and it absolutely needed to go, so I'm fine with it. And with that, the devs give their thoughts, which you can read here, but there is also one more piece of news. Because this update included changes to the multiplayer system that go beyond simple multiplayer balance changes, we anticipate that it will have a bigger impact on gameplay than the average update. For that reason, the next update will be sooner than normal and have a focus on changes to multiplayer balance. Now, I can't predict when this would come out. However, the next season starts in March, which is about a month away from now. That would personally be my guess if they do want to try to align that all over again. It's hard to predict what these balance changes are going to do when they're in addition to so many other things, but for the most part, there's not too many significant changes. I think the main winners here are Dynamo, Blaster, and Tri-Slosher, though other options like ZF could be interesting to see. And I think the nerfs to both S-Blast and Reef Slider are both pretty well done, and something that the game has needed for a bit in those fields. There was a lot of complaints about this stuff. Ultimately, this patch is going to be a bit of a gamble. We have to make sure that fighting weapons still stay strong enough, and that's the one aspect where this patch, as per usual, has been lacking. There hasn't been a whole lot of buffs to fighting weapons to help make them stronger, and with S-Blast being nerfed, the overall fighting power of midlines is going to be weaker. That said, if there's any patch where I can come up with an excuse for it, I guess it would be this one given the universal changes all around, which do seem to benefit main weapon power overall. So hopefully that will be a good way to keep the overall flow of the game less special spammy, especially given that we also got some nerfs to special spam output in this patch. X-Rank also got a small change. The top weapon displayed is now your most used weapon, not most recent, which is good. Unfortunately, the ability to stand on top of the Clam Blitz basket, as demonstrated by Shiny, is patched out. I guess when it happened on stream, Nintendo took note. That said, I'm going to be doing a more in-depth analysis of this once the patch comes out, as well as probably a solo video on Dynamo at this point. I've done so many videos bashing it that I might as well start giving it some credit now that it's finally buffed. That all said, this video took a while to get out, so again, please subscribe, like, or share it if you enjoyed. I'll see you all when the update drops.